Good evening all and welcome to the April meeting of the Economy, Place, Access and Transport Scrutiny Committee. And welcome to all those watching from home also. We'll get straight in. Apologies. We have Councillor Whitcroft apologies, is that right?
Yes, Councillor Whitcroft sends apologies and I am substituting for him this evening.
Welcome, Councillor Coles. And there's no other apologies. I believe Councillor Hook and Councillor Vassey are on their way. Any declarations of interest, colleagues? Councillor Coles, were you signalling?
I was. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I just wanted to declare an interest under item 5, emergency planning, because of my substantive role as the Deputy Mayor for Police, Fire and Crime. Certainly issues including flooding fall under the remit of the fire service among other local government providers.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. That's duly noted. Any other declarations of interest, colleagues? No? Okay, fantastic. Right, we'll move on then to the minutes. So this item deals with the minutes from the last meeting on the 25th of March. I'm aware of a couple of sort of minor issues relating to capital letters, punctuation. We can pick them up and approve correcting them. Councillor Stewart sent some through in writing. I should say as well before colleagues comment further, I'd made a note and Councillor Stewart had emailed through similarly to highlight that, how do I word this? Some of the more challenging aspect of our discussion when we met in March wasn't really reflected in the paper. So I voiced my displeasure at the complete lack of a proper report on parking provision, and the very late notice around how or why that couldn't be done or that it wouldn't be done. And there were further comments of challenge that aren't quite captured in the paper. What I don't want to do is get into a discussion where we are debating the wording of a few sentences or a paragraph. I would welcome members to submit their own suggested wording by email and we can come back to the minutes at the next meeting. I'll do the same because I wasn't quite happy with some of those, as I say, more challenging discussions not quite being captured. I think some of the more pertinent questions raised by members as well aren't quite reflected in those minutes too. Having said that, do colleagues have anything else that they'd like to raise on those minutes? Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry for being late. It's the bit on paragraph 54 on page 8, where it just said members asked whether there were any delays in house building in the Boroughbridge Road. The reason why I raised it was to stress the point that something with planning permission, they've had planning permission for nearly 4 years, if not more. They're only building 10 houses at a time. It's not going to get thousands of houses built. So that's why I raised it. And it doesn't, that just sounded a bland question.
Understood. Again, I'm happy for you to send a preferred form of words in if you like. We won't sign it off in private though, it will come back to the next meeting. Councillor Merritt.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your introductory comments and I will take the opportunity to follow that up, but I just flag that in particular, minute 55 recommendation 2 doesn't match your reformulated recommendation at the last meeting, which I think was quite one of the important discussions. So I'll write in on that. But also the work plan, I did ask questions about when would be a useful time for us to look at the review of the enhanced partnership, which is now due to take place. And the director did suggest that might be best provisionally timetabled for September. I wouldn't want to lose track of that.
Thanks, Councillor Merritt.
Both the EP and other bus matters. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Colleagues, any more? I mean, I should stress as well that what I've just said, I don't think for a second reflects on the work of the officer who supports this meeting. It must be an absolute nightmare keeping track of council meetings, especially ones chaired by me. So I hope it's all taken in positive spirit and we'll get to the right place. Thank you all. The next item is public participation. We have two speakers tonight. The first one is Flick Williams, who is taking part remotely. Flick, can you hear me?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon / good evening to you. You know the drill, Flick, so fire away at will.
As this scrutiny committee reaches its conclusion in its current format that emphasises both access and transport in its title, I felt it timely to speak about bus access. After much persistence from yours truly at the Bus Enhanced Partnership, we now have the figures for bus access refusals for disabled people who use wheelchairs or mobility scooters, although the problem is wider. Overcrowded buses create multiple problems for all disabled and older people. The figures are frankly shocking. They show that since last July, First Bus have had 140 access refusals, and I'm not even convinced the figures are accurate. So where is the plan to remedy this? The Bus Accessibility Task and Finish Group was set up back in the mists of February 2024. Despite not completing its work by the end of the third meeting in February 2025, it took more complaining by me at the last Enhanced Partnership last week to get the next meeting rescheduled. The repeated delay doesn't meet my definition of a task and finish group. I think it's a fair assessment to say that this work has low to no priority, and I'm not optimistic that even after it completes its work, it won't just be shunted into a siding and forgotten about, much like the issue of dial-a-ride community transport. So let's put it into context. Last month, the Transport Select Committee published its report, Access Denied, which concludes that disabled people are being routinely failed across the piece when it comes to public transport. Even more damningly, the report says these failings are being seen incorrectly as customer service failings rather than a denial of disabled people's human rights to travel in the same way as non-disabled people. Disabled people are now being told we must work, are having our entitlement to benefits removed by this Labour government without acknowledging the many barriers to getting and keeping work, including transport. The access officer and I watched a wheelchair user get refused access to 3 successive buses at the station recently because the space was already occupied by another. The failure to buy new buses with 2 wheelchair spaces is coming home to roost. I cannot begin to tell you the stress of trying to be somewhere on time when you have no guarantee of being able to board a bus, when ambulant passengers board, leaving you behind. It is degrading and humiliating. The executive member states that busy buses are a nice problem to have. Well, not if you're disabled, they're not. These issues only get fixed with increased frequency on all routes, which won't happen whilst private operators protect their bottom line, whilst relying on taxpayer money to socialise the loss on less profitable routes. And to add insult to injury, last week, First Bus in Parliament Street on a marketing jolly, giving away an Apple Watch to the winner of a totally non-inclusive game, funded, I suspect, by BSIP, again, taxpayer money. Disabled people need the plan to fix this. Thank you.
Forgive me. Thank you, Flick. Your comments will be taken into account. You refer to that refusal data, which you have sent to me late this afternoon. I will share that with committee members as well, because I think it is quite shocking, and it's something that the public need to be aware of. On Dial and Ride, it is hoped that item will come back to the future version of this scrutiny committee. We are overdue an update on that, particularly following the significant work that went into the task group by members of this committee. So hopefully we'll get something meaningful on that in due course. I will move now to the next speaker who is with us in the room. That's Gwen Swinburne. Gwen, please do take a seat. And begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and for letting me register late. I appreciate it. Members, enough is enough. The Groves, a significantly deprived area, is being crushed by Labour's parking scheme. On-street charges jumped from £1.20 to £5 without consultation, implemented on day one, unlike in Bishy Road and Micklegate that got special privileges, as so often. Businesses face £5 plus hourly rates enforced in much of the Groves by meters from 8 AM to 8 PM daily. Free parking, none exists. The handful of Sunday places are useless, far from the shops or churches. Meanwhile, wealthier areas such as East Parade offer 1 hour free slots, a £3 an hour car park and ample free parking. It's equidistant from the centre to the Groves. Bishy Road, equally equidistant, provides free 1 hour spaces and plenty of free parking just a 10-minute walk away. Tadcaster Road just secured by the executive a TRO for free 1 hour parking solely to support their shops. The Groves, Labour gives us nothing. This isn't an oversight, it's simply an unfair policy targeting one of the most vulnerable communities and businesses. Labour's resident parking scheme, meant initially as a service for residents, now generates 600 to 700,000 annually, operated as a profit-driven tax, and they want more. As such, every property in York should be subject to the same tax. Without consultation, they have also given our spaces to guest houses and HMOs without telling us, reducing resident parking already very tight. Property splits and short-term rentals make matters worse. Labour's Equality Impact Assessment, published weeks after the decision was made, ignored on-street parking impacts. That's outrageous. Labour's one-size-fits-all pricing hurts the Groves the most, with no mitigations. Expansion to Holgate, Acomb and Tanghall will spread this injustice unless you act. As a scrutiny committee, please undertake a full policy review to address this unfair system. Free parking trials near Groves area shops to save businesses. A citywide fair charging system prioritising deprived areas. This is a Labour administration. Equity should matter. Please also finally scrutinise the unconstitutional, unlawful governance as well as each step of decision-making and implementation, as well as zero communications, which at every step has been an utter failure with management being silent and frontline staff in the fray. This scheme has been an utter mess and it still is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gwen, for your contribution. Your comments will be taken into account. I should say for the committee's awareness, I allowed Gwen to speak after the registration deadline because we didn't have many other speakers. We had one other person, and I'm quite happy to have as many people in as possible within reason. If we had 10 people, you wouldn't be here. It was justly.
Of course. Thank you, Chair.
Cheers.
Thank you, Quincy.
Okay, colleagues, so we'll move on to the first main item of business, which follows a request from I think one of the committee members. I forget which one of you it was, or maybe they're not on this committee anymore, but it's to look at the council's approach to emergency planning. Please can the relevant officers, and I believe Councillor Jenny Kent, and Councillor Douglas was it just Councillor Douglas with the officers? Okay, cool. The more the merrier, but yeah. So we have the leader, Claire Douglas, with us around the table, and officers, if you'd like to introduce yourselves. I know, James, you're a frequent visitor to this committee.
Thank you. So I'm James Gilchrist. I'm the Director for Environment, Transport and Planning. Hello, I'm Steve Ball. I'm the Emergency Planning Manager for City of York Council.
And hello everyone, my name's Georgia Meredith. I work for North Yorkshire Council, but we have a shared service agreement. So I work with City of York Council as well, and a Resilience and Emergencies Officer.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for the paper. As you know, we take it as read, but if you can give a short summary, we'll then get into questions, comments, maybe some recommendations. I don't know who wants to give that short summary before we dive in. Okay.
Yeah, I don't mind doing that, Chair, thank you. Yeah, we're requested to come here information on how we prepare for common emergencies and what we have in place to prepare for the less common emergencies. With common emergencies being flood, public information and guidance and impact of major schemes. And then less common being food insecurity, novel disease outbreaks, major drought, heatwave and wildfires. The first thing I did is I laid out the legislation that governs how we react and what we do across our services. Also includes how we work with other partners and how we engage. And then at paragraph 6, you'll see that I've put how we embedded within City of York Council. I come under James Gilchrist, who's my director, and work closely with the LRF, which is the Local Resilience Forum, which provides the plans on multi-agency response across the whole of North Yorkshire and City of York. We engage in our incident response and complete corporate training for everyone who's involved in the incident response, attending events, exercises, which are not only within York itself, but also across North Yorkshire. And you'll have seen we've done a couple of those over the last few years, which have been in York itself, and some very high profile ones, which have received a lot of public attention and engaged with national responders as well. We do get audited by Veritao on how we respond to emergencies and what we do, and also in relation to business continuity here. Outside of that, with the LRF, we also undergo the same sort of scrutiny from audit purposes, and just last year had a peer review as well, for an independent peer review, to see how the LRF does respond. Paragraph 11 shows elected members as to how we engage with elected members, and how we would like you to engage with communities and respond during emergencies as well, and provides a series of training to show that how we respond to emergencies. And there is a training package which is available on Milo to all councillors, which gives an explanation on what is required from each of the partner agencies engaged within the LRF and response, and the sort of processes and protocols in how we do respond to any sort of emergencies. One of the main things is providing the leadership and guidance for you guys in relation to the community resilience, and helping with that preparedness before the event, which is really key on how people do respond and the sort of level of reaction that we have. So that is something that we'd like to engage a bit further with. When we move into the Local Resilience Forum itself, our Chief Operating Officer sits on the strategic group, also known as the Executive Board, and sets out a strategy. The strategy, which previously has been a work plan over the last 5 years, and now for the next 5 years, we're looking at a strategy as to how we should respond. And you'll see in paragraph 14 there, how we've identified 6 themes, which are taken from the National Resilience Standards on how we should prepare ourselves and how we should respond for any sort of emergencies, and then how we should recover from any emergencies that we do respond to. As part of all of these, you'll see the risk, responsibility and accountability, partnerships, communities, investment and skills. It's not just our participation within each of those themes, it's every other agency that we work alongside with, because we can't do everything from local authority. Some of it does rely on other responders. The overall theme here, we've got several capabilities that are being looked at underneath there. The strategic sponsor for those, which on one has been led by James, but the strategic sponsor is Ian Floyd, who's our Chief Operating Officer, looking at capability gaps across the whole of the partnership work area. And so that includes, and I appreciate we've mentioned wildfires and things. If we look at wildfires, how does the fire service respond to them, and are there any gaps that they have that we need to know about? Because how we respond to something might make a difference if we know about those gaps. And if there is a gap, how can we close them? Which again is the other really important part of it. That's a piece of work which has been going on now for the last sort of 18 months. We've done the first phase of it. We have LRF members who are dealing almost solely with that capability gap and trying to go into a deep dive once we've got the first set of skills as to how each organisation would mark itself and how confident it is in responding to any sort of emergency or major incident. The peer review that we have also takes part in that as well, as to how people are responding and how we engage with others and how honest we are across that side. You'll see in paragraph 16 we mentioned the national events. The national events we have as a set standard which comes down from Cabinet Office, which is put forward by the government, sets out our training schedule that should be there for the next 12 months. And identifies certain national exercises that we're expected to take part in. We've done one already this year, which a national exercise, which is part of the pandemic planning, and there's another 2 planned for later this year in relation to pandemics. And you'll also see that we've done the counter-terrorism ones and human infectious disease, which mentioned, which is at Pegasus for September and October later this year. The counter-terrorism ones are the ones that we mentioned earlier that were in York. We had the exercise Spring Resolve, and we also had the one at the Minster as well, which did get quite a bit of press. Within our own council ourselves, every time we have any sort of emergency, we have business continuity, which we're also responsible for within the organisation. And it's trying to make sure that every service area is at least engaging with having its own plan, and should something go wrong, we have a process as to how we can overcome that and try and restore back to some sort of normality during the incident. And so each of the service areas is encouraged to complete a plan each year and make sure it's fit for purpose, and make sure that staff are trained and know how to engage with the activating the business continuity and how to escalate things within the service itself. We mentioned about the training earlier, as to how everyone's trained on this, and so we have a director who's on call as a silver, who will be the corporate silver commander for us, who takes responsibility for everything across the council and would escalate up to gold if need be of any sort of incidents that are likely to affect different service areas rather than just one single service area, so that everybody's aware and we've got a corporate response at that level of engagement. We encourage them to also work towards the standards, national occupational standards and national resilience standards, to make sure we comply with all of the legislation and how people do respond to that. When it comes to the local resilience forum, we do exactly the same with that, and we try and engage with each part of the skills. I chair the community resilience group. As part of the community resilience group, we try and reach the members of the community that have been difficult to reach over previous years. Over the last couple of years, we received £50,000 of Cabinet Office funding to look at how to engage in different ways, and we've got now Yorkshire Ready Together, which is a QR code which you can download on our website, and you can actually log onto that site and you can ask questions, which is a bit like a bot, and it'll respond to you as to how you can prepare for different types of incidents. So if in York you're concerned about the floods, you can say, give me more information on the floods, and it will provide that level of information, because people are dealing and engaging with authorities in a different way now than they used to be years ago. And so the bot is a different way of us trying to engage with those hard to reach communities. The main aim of this is trying to make sure that we have whole society resilience, because it's important for, when we're not there, that each person, each group, each household, each community, each business has their own plan to be resilient. And you see some really nice stories. And we saw one just the other week when we had the burst water pipes, and a hairdresser who made it onto the news because she bought bottles of water. Really simple, but that's the level of engagement that we need to get to. And if everybody had their own plan like that, it would make our job an awful lot easier. So that's what we're trying to get to. The Local Resilience Forum itself, we've changed our website, and we now have the risks on there, and there's the National Risk Register, which we look at the risks that we're likely to face, which do have a scale on how critical they're going to be for ourselves. The National Risk Register is now available to the public. It didn't used to be a few years ago, and we did used to complain about that side of it. How can you prepare for risks if you don't know about them? We then have a community risk register underneath that, so that engages people to look at the community risk register, and then locally you can look at your own risks if you live in a flood area, or if you're likely to be affected by wildfires, or because you live on the moors or something. That's another side that you can look at the detail of risk and apply all your own level of risk to it, and then take an emergency plan and have a household plan or an individual plan, so that if the incident does happen, you can respond in a better way than you would do if you didn't have any plan at all. So that's ultimately what we're trying to get to, and working towards all these standards, and make sure that we feed all of this information. Make sure we feed all this information back into the government areas to make sure that we're properly prepared and respond to everything that we're asked. That's it, Chair. If happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that quite thorough summary. It's appreciated. I have a couple of questions, but I'm happy to let members kick off. Councillor Hook.
Thank you very much. Just this week seems to have been full of emergencies. You've had the one in Spain, you've had the one in Vancouver, and you've had people driving into a whole load of people's houses. Do you think we can cope with all? I know we've got the HVM measures now, which is wonderful against the Vancouver thing, but do you think we're prepared for any of all of those?
I would love to say yes, we're prepared for everything, but the answer is people develop all of the time. The more we can target harden any area that we have, and we mentioned the HVM, and yes, people are more likely to go to different places because we have something in place ourselves. So we have target hardened our area, and you mentioned bulldozing through houses. Yeah, if somebody's got mental health issues, it's how we deal with them on that side. And I don't know what was to cause that. It might have had somebody who's had a gripe against the council or the builders, or so there's how can you plan for that? And it's down to the business to make sure that they have their own security in place on their building site, and things are protected, rather than our job to look after that side. And obviously there'll be a police investigation, so I probably shouldn't comment any more on that at the end of the day.
I think just to flag, all those risks though are either in the local resilience forum risk register around power, they're in the national risk register. So those things are there, things that we are tasked with planning for. So there are plans in place for all of those. But as Steve rightly says, you never quite know what you're going to turn up and see.
I mean, if I may, I mean, I'll treat it as a supplementary. One of my questions was going to relate to what's happened in Spain and Portugal, and I was thinking, blimey, if that happened here, my household would be screwed. Forgive the way I've worded that, but I consider myself a fairly engaged citizen. Maybe I'm not, but I mean, I'm letting the side down in terms of being prepared, and I'm just thinking, well, if that's me, the general public's probably in a similar-ish position. How many people out there do we think know about the local resilience forum, and is there any scope to promote that more widely so that people can independently better prepare themselves for various different scenarios, such as stocking up on loads of good torches and having a wind-up radio? Just two ideas.
Yeah, we do publicise lots of this information, and it's available on City of York website, and the link is there to take you directly through. And that was the whole point of the Yorkshire Ready Together, in the fact that everything there is in one place. And if you pick on that link and you go to it, and you can either use it on your phone as a chat bot, or you can do it on the internet or with a QR code. You ask it a question, and if it's nothing at all to do with the local authority, you're asking a question about, we've mentioned the utility outages, it will pass you onto the experts, and they will give you that guidance. It also provides a link to go to the LRF, so you can look at the risk register that's on there, and there is a template for a personal plan or a household plan, so you can fill those in as well. So we're trying to encourage as much as we can. And like I said, this is the first time, and the Cabinet Office actually put some money forward, so it was new money for a project. It was innovation funding, so it was really good we got that, and we took the lead in relation to North Yorkshire's LRF for the whole of Yorkshire, so it's Yorkshire and Humber wide, and engages the risk. And the links, if you get onto North Yorkshire's, it will link you into North Yorkshire's LRF. And if you click on it when you're in West Yorkshire, it will go to West Yorkshire's LRF. So it's relevant information depending on the location, because we do migrate quite a bit as well. So So did you want to come in, James?
Yeah, I was going to compliment what Steve was saying. I think there's two aspects to that power outage bit, isn't there? There's one, what is the impact on us at home? The flip side is how we prioritise those residents at home who need support. And we've got some vulnerable people data, so we know who we need to go to in a power cut. We work closely with Northern Power Grid in those circumstances so that we can support residents that are on dialysis or those sorts of things. So we have that data set so we can prioritise. The other bit of it is about those business continuity plans. So how can this building, the hospital, those sorts of places continue to operate at times of power cut? And that's part of those business continuity plans that are there all the time anyway. So this building 6 years ago had quite a significant power cut, and almost seamlessly those services that needed to continue operating moved on to the area in the first floor that is powered from a generator in an emergency. Those of us that didn't need to remain in the building went home to work from home. So there are quite detailed plans for each of these sorts of scenarios. What every business should be doing, and particularly those that sort of services to the public, should be looking at that as well in terms of those business continuity plans. Part of the role we have is to promote that to business, isn't it?
It is. There is a national plan in relation to the outage, and internationally, you will, and people might not know this. The outage that's happened in Spain has happened previously. It's happened in Canada and it's happened in the USA, and space weather interference from things outside our control is one of the risks that we do look at nationally, and that loss of services, which can include loss of ATM machines, as we've just seen in Spain, and the traffic lights. And so it is something we do plan for. The risk is low, but we do have a plan as to what we would do. Obviously, I won't go into a lot of detail as to what it is, but we do have places where we would gather and meet, and we do have a command structure who would respond to that accordingly as well, to make sure we're represented at the right level and feed into international systems. And there is a process for planned outages as well. So I do think we're about as well prepared as we can be, and I also find that people across York and North Yorkshire are more resilient to losing power in relation to that. They know exactly what to do. In urban areas where things are built up a lot more, you get less of that engagement. Here you see people, certainly agricultural wise, where they could go without it today. We saw it during Storm Wind, and we took a lot of the learning out to Storm our Wind, when there was some of the services that were off for 4 or 5 days, and how we engage with them. And James has mentioned the vulnerable people. We're now trying to get down to the level of detail so that if we have someone vulnerable and we have that outage, we've got enough contact with them, and we're dealing with our adult social care as well, to get a bit more detail as to exactly what do they need during that time. Are they resilient for 4 hours? Are they resilient for 8 hours? And if that's the case, do we have to send somebody around to check on them? And Georgia, who's been doing a lot of work as well with rest centres. Rest centres are somewhere else, which is really vital, is to having enough rest centres. If we all lose power, you can have no heating at home. So can we heat just one place and make sure that at least we've got one place for people to go? So that level of engagement with local communities and the availability of rest centres is really key. And I'm also now looking at, could we use the community levy to say, well, more of these rest centres or community centres should be more resilient in relation to their energy. Should they have battery storage, so that when all the homes lose their electricity, we can go into one place and they don't need to be on the national grid anymore because they've got battery storage. Things are developing all the time, and it's just how can we further improve and learn from mistakes that have been made in the past, or better technology that's coming down to enable us to do things that we couldn't do in the past.
Thank you. Is it supplementary? Yeah, I can't see your word for it.
Is there a list accessible?
Sorry, Jane.
Is there a list somewhere accessible to the public of where these rest centres are? Because I must admit, I've never heard of it.
The answer to that is no. What we don't want to do is give a list out to everyone to say this is what's available. That's showing all your assets as to where people are like to gather during a crisis. But it's done dynamically, so that depending on the type of incident and what the level of risk is, it might not be the nearest rest centre that is the best. It might be down due to the number. We might have to migrate them across to the next neighbourhood. so it can accommodate more people, or if it's going to be a long term, can we put beds in there, because we've got some temporary beds and things as well. So it'll be a dynamic decision who's made by senior officers to say which res centre we're going to use, which is the most convenient, and which is the most appropriate, and is it available? Is it available today? Is it available for the next week? You know, it's those sort of considerations that we'd have to be looking at. We do have the list, and we obviously could share it, but it has personal details on there in relation to telephone numbers and things and how we contact them. And it's usually community centres that we use in church halls, leisure centres, which we can take over. You know, and it depends what type of plan, because some of them do double hat in relation to being a casualty clearance area, where we take the injured or vulnerable people, and the others might go to a rest centre, which is a bit different. So we have a sliding scale of how we would respond, and different locations for those.
Can I just add something? In any sort of incident like that, what we have is a single version of the truth. And some of you that have been involved in flooding will have seen these in the past, where we circulate what we know, what we're doing. So if it was in your ward that a rest centre was being set up, you'd be notified by the command as a ward councillor, so that you knew what was going on. So as those decisions are made, councillors are kept up to date so that you are aware, and you're an important part of that communication process to residents.
Thank you, and apologies, Councillor Burton. I should have gone to you before Councillor Healy. Fire away.
That's okay. I'm somebody who's been evacuated, and also in 2000, and then also in the 2015 Boxing Day floods was quite affected and had no phone and no mobile phone signal, as many people didn't. But what I did commend was the amount of contact we had. I mean, the army were brought in pretty quickly, and I suspect that's something that would happen depending on the emergency. But the army did come round and were knocking on the door. In fact, they were a bit of a nuisance. They were waking us up to tell us what was going on. And it's like, no, we just want to sleep. But that was good, because you had no way of communicating with the outside world. So also I noticed in my local community centre, before the flood protection was put in my area, which thank goodness is now in, and hopefully we're now safe going forward, and those days are behind me. But there were meetings where we went along, and groups of local residents got together. I was described as vulnerable and identified as that, so that in a flood, some neighbours would come around and see that I was okay first, even though I was doing that for the people in 2015. But it was quite reassuring, and I'm hoping and thinking that that goes on all as well. And then finally, I know I'm also registered as vulnerable with my gas and electric suppliers, and they've done quite good jobs when I've had power cuts and I've rung up. They know that I'm vulnerable, and they will try and get the power on quicker, because you're in that group of people. I'm just wondering, I'm quite switched on to reading newspapers, radio and everything. What about contacting people who are not as in touch with what's going on, sort of older people? How would we get in touch with them? And is that an ongoing project, really, is what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, so Adult Social Care provide us with a list on a fortnightly basis, I think, of vulnerable people, who they consider vulnerable people. What we are doing is trying to improve that data set so that we understand in a bit more detail what vulnerable means. So in a power cut, it might be this cohort of people. In a water supply issue, it might be this cohort of people. So that actually, rather than knocking on the door and asking if you're okay, we can be a bit more targeted. But actually, we don't require people to select as much. If they're on adult social care or children's social care radar, then we hold that list and we share that with the power companies if people are potentially at risk. Equally, as you know, the power companies hold a list themselves as well. So there's two approaches to try and make sure we capture everybody.
Yeah, I mean, they're actually really good, because they sent me a phone that you could just plug into the socket, rather than because I've got a cordless battery phone that was useless during a power cut. So they just send you a very cheap one, so you've got it on hand should you need it, and it's and a torch, actually, a really good torch, quite all free, and it's such a good thing to have for people who, you know, might have been in the same position as I was. You don't, like you say, you don't sort of think about these things necessarily. And I mean, we've got the mobile phone, but as long as you've got some charge, that's the main thing. Yeah, but it's good. I mean, I feel quite comforted by what I'm reading here today, and hearing what you know, that you've got a handle on all of this.
It's really nice. It's really nice to hear that, Councillor. It's a case of trying to make sure that people who need that assistance, and you can self-identify with the utility companies to say, I'm vulnerable. And it doesn't always depend on having an illness or something that you've got a particular need, or somebody in your family has a particular need, and they do provide that extra bit of attention for you and provide the details to us. As James said, we're trying to get into a bit more detail now as to what vulnerability means to people who come through the council, in trying to engage as to how resilient are they for a number of hours. And the advice that we give on the LRF website, again, is about people having a grab bag, so that if you are vulnerable, you've got the things that you do need, like your key medication. And if you did have to leave your house in a real hurry, you've got a power cable for your phone, and you've got your medication, you've got your spectacles, and you've got a contact number in case you haven't got your phone, so we could make contact with someone who can engage with and look after you. And a lot of it is about having that personal resilience, and your family resilience, and your community resilience, building each of these in, so there's different steps for yourself. Going back to the 2015 floods, yes, we would engage with military again if need be. I was also involved in that. I was on the call with David Cameron, who was the PM at the time, who sent the soldiers here, who didn't really want to come because they were in Cumbria and in West Yorkshire at the time. And it just shows that the level of commitment and resilience and availability across the country is also reassuring, that they can respond to more than one incident and provide that backup. So yes, it's something that we have that escalation process. We can ask for military assistance ourselves, and we put it through a senior officer, and then go through Cabinet Office to ask for military assistance, because we don't control that. But if it's available, then it's something that they will set out. Times might be different now, because obviously some of the challenges are different internationally, and that decision is out of our hands, but they would always provide something, just like they did in COVID as well, with sending military planners in to assist us. But yeah, it's something we always work with, engaging with them, and we do have a nominated joint regional liaison officer who we work with all the time, who's from the military. He's a senior officer from the military who takes part in the LRF services and advises us on what the military can bring, which, as we know from the 2015-16 floods, it was a Chinook helicopter as well, you know, not just the officers, which repaired it more quickly than it would have done. So it is all about that working together, not us taking responsibility for everybody else's problems and trying to solve them. We sit down and do everything together and try and come up with the best plan and who's the best people to respond to it.
So Healy, you've got supplementary on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Picking up the military aspect of this, are there plans in place to adjust how you work based on the closure of Fulford Barracks, which I believe is a joint headquarters for the 2nd Division, so there's like generals there and quite a lot of senior officers, which will all be leaving, which I'm guessing at the moment, that's where the sort of military contact happens. Because I would imagine that we're quite.
I've got to say the answer's no, because it's ministerial authority for us to use military services. York is quite well respected in relation to the historical. It's a secondary signalling area. That's why we get the gun salutes here. There will always be a level of local engagement, but if we ask for help, it needs a minister to sign that off to send the military in. Previously, we have just gone to the barracks and knocked on the door and said, "Can you send people down?" But that's not the way things should be done, because they've got other commitments, not just responding to local issues, local emergencies. They may well be deployed elsewhere internationally, and that's why we can't make that decision. It means a senior officer has got to fill a form in, send a request in via the Cabinet Office, and then the Minister will look at it, Minister for Defence will look at it and say, yes, we can, or no, we can't spare 200 soldiers for you.
I think just to clarify that there is one of these military liaison officers for each patch of the country. So there is a military liaison officer assigned to the local resilience forum. So it's not based on geography or where your barracks might be. They are assigned to the local resilience forum and work closely with, and that's for each resilience forum across the country.
Thank you.
We actually have two for North Yorkshire. We have one from the RAF as well. So we're sort of better connected because of the air bases that we have within North Yorkshire. So we get two lots of representation.
Councillor Coles, you've been very patient.
No, thanks. It's not supplementary. Can I just
Sure.
go?
Yeah.
Great. I had a question about just resources and capacity to be able to do what was kind of needed for the city. There's a point at point 14 around investment and ensuring that there's enough investment to enable us to prepare and respond and recover from incidents. I just wondered whether there was anything you could say about just resources and capacity and just the challenges more widely that the local authorities facing, and therefore how that fits in the ranking of things. I would expect this to be pretty high up, but it'd be useful to know. And then just a couple of other points. I think at the end of the paper, it asks us members to promote resilience within their communities. I just wondered if you could set out in a little more detail what that means, because certainly when I was reading it, one of the scenarios that I went to in my head was what happens if the phone signals are off, and actually you won't be able to ring local member councillors because the phones won't be working. So actually, how do local people potentially get information in those scenarios? Should we be putting things in the notice boards, the ward notice boards, for example, or visually up in the windows of community centres like they do in chemists around kind of those emergency contacts? So just any guidance that you can give us around that. And just also, any emergency, my experience has been that it will bring out the very best of a community, but it would also sometimes reveal some of the more nefarious elements who will take advantage of a situation. And so it's just also just what you do to get that balance and for us in our roles to encourage that good behaviour in our communities and what people need to do to optimise that. But thank you for the paper. It's really useful, and to all the officers and staff who work on this all the time, because it is something that is the thing that someone's got to think about, the worst case scenarios, and that's what you're doing. So we're very grateful. So thank you.
I'll pick up the investment question. So I think what we are, Steve touched on the capabilities piece, and I think that is really important. So what that's looking at is, we've got all these risks identified both nationally and locally, and indeed at a council level. How have we got the right capabilities to respond? And if not, those are probably the areas that we'll need to identify investment for. As a local resilience forum, we have been successful at bringing in external funding, both through the government and other pots, in terms of making sure we do invest. That tends to be in terms of planning and preparing plans, making sure we've got the equipment and those sorts of things. I think what would happen, and one of the challenges of being one of those directors on call, is that actually you may have to authorise spend, which you never thought you would have to authorise because of the nature of the event, and you just can't plan for it. So there is an element of, there isn't necessarily a budget for these things. You have to just make the right judgment call on the day. And sometimes the budget, and that's the challenge, is the budget will have to follow, but actually it's looking after the communities and doing the right thing at the time. But the reason why we come together as a local resilience forum is to make sure that actually, is the council the best people to do that? Is it the police? Is it the fire service? So it's making sure that the right people make those decisions. Where the council nearly always picks up the pieces is in the recovery phase. So quite often it'll be blue flashing lights and not the council at the front end of a lot of these sorts of incidents. But the recovery phase, where we support communities and sort of whatever a new normal looks like, depending on the incident, that is nearly always the council that gets involved and leads that stage of the process. And sometimes that can be the most expensive bit of the process because they can take, for some incidents, many years, decades potentially. So that investment in some of those can be significant. There are government schemes to support that. So some of you may have heard of the Bellwyn scheme when flooding takes place. At certain levels, the government will support councils in terms of the recovery phases for that. And there are arrangements made, shall we say, when there are significant things like that that happen. Do you want to pick up the sort of community?
Yeah, in relation to the community, yes, I would say promote it within your own communities and signpost people to get the correct information. Sometimes it can be a bit of a nightmare when you type in the words local resilience forum. What does it bring up and what does it mean to people? We've tried to make that a little bit easier now by using that Yorkshire Ready Together, which is an easier sort of logo, and we've tried to signpost people. We've redone the website on the LRF now, on the local resilience forum website, to make it easier for people to look at risks and look at how to make a community plan or a household plan. The template's there for them to do it. So lots of the links are there and the information's there as well. And what we're trying to do is make sure that everyone's got access to it. We're doing a promotion which is in Selby about the Yorkshire Ready Together to see how people engage with it. We have dip sampled across the whole of Yorkshire to find out how people engage and the way they want to engage. What do they class as a safe space if we do have an incident? Schools come up pretty high on the level there as well as to where they go and congregate. But again, there's other issues there with safeguarding if it's during term time. So it's making sure that we provide the information as to what the public want. And what we don't want to do when it comes to a community plan is for us to say, you have to have one, because they don't have to have one. It would just really help if they do. And it helps them, it helps the neighbours, it really helps. But we can't say you have to have one and force it on them. They've got to want the plan. They've got to believe in resilience. They've got to look at what resilience means to themselves. They've got to understand where they can get the information, but get the right information from the right organisation and even look at the risk as to what is the risk in their area. And if they're not likely to have a flood, what's the point in planning them for a flood? If they're likely to be more risk because they're in a high-rise building and a more risk of fire, then look at the risk for fire. And there's ways they can look at these things themselves, promote their own safety, develop their grab bag, know what to do during that emergency, know who to call, who to get the right information from if they need something. And that's ultimately what we need to do, is signposting people to get the information, making sure it's available and less confusing when they do ask a question on the internet, rather than getting lost in a world of nothing.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick supplementary, because I just followed your advice. And I've got the very, very handy printables page of the Yorkshire Ready Together page, which has a QR code on it, which I've just scanned. But of course, if there was, in certain scenarios, that would be no use at all, because people's phones wouldn't work, or actually for a significant section of the community, QR code would make zero sense to them at all. So I suppose it's just how you get that balance of message now, and others, I guess that's part of our role as members in ensuring that we're able to pick up the core message of what it is that people should be doing to be alert and prepared, or whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing. Because I'm probably a bit like Councillor Taylor, and probably most of us have given this very little thought. I'd probably last about 24 hours in the wild before something got me, because I wouldn't have got a water bottle or a charger or anything to, so I guess it's, having printables is great. And we absolutely could put these up in our ward notice boards and all those kind of things. That would be really useful. But that's digitally excluding all the people in the community who don't use that kind of technology. And in my ward, that would be quite a significant portion of people. So it's just making sure that we've got both of those bases covered, so that we're not actually inadvertently causing problems with some of the people who actually will be more in need of help and resilience if something happens. And actually, even if they try and get help, they wouldn't know how to, because it's a QR code.
Yes, you're right, Kelly. That's why we did the survey beforehand as to how people want to engage and what's not available now. So we did look at that, and a lot of the younger people do like a QR code. Some of the older people can't remember what they're writing halfway through when they start typing, and I'm one of those as well now. So QR code does make it easier, which is why it's called a quick response code. and it saves typing it all. So it's available on the web, it's available on text, it's available on the QR code, it's available in printable versions. And this is all about people preparing. During a crisis, this might not be the right time to ask how you prepare for a flood. But in the peacetime, when people are preparing, it's how they should be engaging and what they can do. And it's in lots of different formats. It's just they can pick now from a wider choice than they had before in relation to availability. Because not everybody wants to speak to someone like me who can talk for hours about resilience. They'd rather get a QR code, click the button and say, oh yeah, there's the answer. Thank you very much. And it's pointing me in the right place. And if we can engage with more people, and once you've engaged with it and it's on your phone as a chat bot, you can keep asking it questions. You don't keep having to go back to the QR code or the website because it's on your phone as a text message. You can ask questions of it and it will engage with you. And you can, and if just because you've asked a question on terrorism, you can then go back again and ask a question on floods. It doesn't restrict it to one particular area because we're looking at that whole resilience and making sure that people can ask questions on risk and they can ask a bit more detail, even if they're then visiting a different area and they want to do it. So it will still work anywhere throughout the country.
Thank you. Before can I just check, Councillor Stewart, was that supplementary main question? Okay, thank you. Councillor Merritt, is that supplementary? Okay, appreciate your honesty. Thank you. In that case, then we are with Councillor Vassie.
Thank you, Chair. So you've got two areas, if you'll allow me. First is developing the point made by Councillor Coles, actually. What role is the Local Resilience Forum playing in planning for protecting people in the event of an emergency during the digital switchover? I want to kind of understand, because we all know in our wards we've got vulnerable people who don't have digital telephony, don't have the internet, don't have any of that stuff, and at the moment are worrying because over the next 2 years they're going to have their telephone removed because it'll be switched over, and there are a lot of anxious people out there. So I'm just wondering, in the first instance, how you're engaging with that side of the debate and what part you're playing to ensure that if there's an emergency over the next 2 years, we don't find 10,000 people simply disconnected.
Yeah, it is something that we've been planning for. The difficulty with the digital switchover is the fact it went privatised. There's hundreds of different companies which are across the country that are engaging, and it could well be that you sign up for a broadband and they might not even be in this country at all. So there's lots of different levels of engagement that's needed. We've had lots of meetings in relation to that level of engagement, what will work and what won't work across different networks. If you get stuck in a lift and you press the emergency button, it probably won't work. If you're at home and you've got the red code and you need to pull the red code for it to make a telephone call, you know, just it won't work. So all we can do is promote that across different businesses. So if people are in care homes, what is your level of resilience? Do you need a battery backup for your phone? Because it won't work if the electricity gets cut off. You know, there's lots of different areas that we've tried to promote this. It's not local authority problem in relation to it. All we can do is amplify what the experts are telling us, because they're the ones doing the switchover, and the rollout is different for every provider. So you can live on the same street as somebody, and you might have it live for months or a year after your neighbour's been cut off. So again, that's another difficulty, is that level of switch off across the whole country, and that level of engagement, because they're all doing it at a different time. It would be, if it was like just British Telecom that would run in the world or something, we'd be dealing with one person, wouldn't we? But things are a lot more complicated in that world, and it's right to have some concerns. And again, it's, as councillors, engaging with people as much as you can to say, do you know this is happening? Because some people switch off from that level of information when you're talking about technology. And do they know it's happening? Do you know it's going to affect you? And if we can get that message across, at least then they will be able to get on the website, do some research, ask the right companies, ask their own company, what are you providing? As and when it switches off, how long will my phone last? You know, there's lots of questions that are still out there, and it includes, like I said, whether it's things working when it's during an emergency, life support machines when people are dependent for notifying somebody, if it starts to fail. There's lots of complications, and it's all of the health companies that need to look at this, the providers, and the service providers to give people the right information, because they're the ones, if they're customers, they need to advise them what's best for them.
So if I've understood, we're not doing very much directly on that issue, but there is a potential to be doing more. I mean, I take on board everything you've said about there being so many different people to deal with, but in a sense, the local authority has the potential to have an overview to protect all of those people. And I would have thought many people would expect us to be active. I quite accept all the difficulties and challenges you're talking about. I suppose what I'm saying is, are different departments within the local authority and across the region doing everything they can to try and ensure that those people are understood, known, identified, protected?
Yeah, so adult social care are aware of this challenge, so they will be working, for instance, with their clients and customers around this challenge. From the LRF's perspective is the concurrency of someone being switched off at the same time as an incident, and what that means. A lot of the utility companies are what they call category 2 responders and are therefore part of the LRF. So there has been that discussion with them as part of that. But as Steve says, that's increasingly challenging because of that fragmented nature of the industry.
But on that, if I may, James, appreciate there's lots of different companies, but I'm guessing because of the nature of the service, would their response be similar a lot of the time? And if so, what is their response? Because I appreciate social services will be aware of the most vulnerable people. There's always that bracket of society that aren't quite in need enough, but will be under a lot of difficulty if they can't use their phone.
Yeah, all we can do is warn and inform people, and so we will amplify that message that's given out. Like I said, the difficulty is because there's a difference in timeline as to when some companies are switching off. It may well be that service providers, whether it's a care home, they might have several care homes in different places, they might be switching off at different times. But it's down to their level of engagement to make sure that they have something in place, and the best person to advise them as to whether things will work or won't work is the service provider. And that level of information is provided direct from the service provider to the individual. So whoever's the account holder will get that information to say, after this date, these services will not work. If it was blanket across the whole of York and you say York's been switched off on this date, it would be easy for us. We could put a lot more comms out to say this is going to be happening. Do you know it's going to happen? It might affect you, even if you think you're not going to be affected. The chances are it will affect all of us. Even down to your own personal phone in your house, as to it won't work anymore because it's on a digital server instead of the analog one. And we need to be aware of that, because you won't be able to make the same level of calls. And with the same during an emergency, if we lose all of the power, then we'll be reliant on mobile networks an awful lot more than we have done in the past when it was analog. And again, that's another risk that we have to look at, because if something's happening in a remote area, the mast can only take so many phone calls at a particular time. As you mentioned, we saw that in 2015-16 when we lost the comms at Stonegate, and there was a couple around York that we lost the mobile comms mast. And so the fact we've been through that process, there is a telephone preference network that people can go on there, and that's usually for the emergency services or key people who can respond. And it's availability of that, and are they going to widen that to more people who need that level of care when it's a mobile phone making that call rather than analog one? And again, all we can do is ask the questions of the experts, and again, it'll be down to the level of engagement from them and their level of commitment and their desire to put resilient measures in, which is really important to us, whether it's battery backup. And I appreciate now, the more we get solar, the more chance there is of having battery backup. 3 or 4 years ago, when we were talking about this being switched off, which was going to be by 2025 at the time, and it's extended. But the fact we're talking about this years ago, there's more technology available now than there was then. So they might have other options on the table. We will keep asking for it, because those resilient measures are really key, and especially to people in communities that are not as well connected transport wise and comms wise across the network. So it's something that we keep asking for.
Thank you.
Can I ask my second question? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure thing, Councillor Vassie.
It's a more strategic one, a broader one. So I'm just keen to understand how the planning forum, the emergency planning forum, feeds into strategic regional decision-making on critical energy infrastructure. We've heard about how the emergency planning forum reacts to emergencies. And I can see that that would be its principal role. But what does your experience and work in this area contribute to broader strategic decision-making? For example, the need to protect and improve critical energy infrastructure going forwards, dealing with the power companies, trying to knock heads together to ensure that we're thinking about those 10-year, 15-year risks from flooding, from climate change, etc. I'm just wondering how you feed into that.
I think what I would say is it goes back to the very beginning, is the way we identify risk. So the link is to the National Risk Register. So the things you've mentioned are in there at a national level. If you then follow through to the Local Resilience Forum, they're in there at a local level, and that's regional. There is no, the Local Resilience Forum, I think just to be clear, has no decision-making powers. So the decisions are made by the bodies that are there represented. So they are a coordination, influencing piece. The LRF doesn't have decision-making powers as such on its own. So it is about influencing the utility companies. So Northern Power Grid are a Cat 2 responder under the legislation. So that they're tasked with this in legislation about planning for this. That is part of their task, is around that critical infrastructure and protecting that. So yes, those things are planned for, and the consequences of when it goes wrong are also planned for in there, Stephen.
Yeah, and also there was a lot of learning which came out from us locally, the Tadcaster Bridge, when that went down in 2015. And the reason why I say that is because we knew that lots of utilities and lots of other equipment went through Tadcaster Bridge. And one of my jobs at the time was speaking with those and finding out how things could be diverted. And the utility companies do have a way of diverting to their customers and rerouting electricity, gas, critical airwaves for our emergency responders. These things can be diverted different ways. Sometimes it might take a little bit of time, but they do have robust measures to put in place. And it is discussed nationally, with Tadcaster Bridge being a really good example of how this can be done and the learnings that came out of losing Tadcaster Bridge. So something that's really local to us and a lot of learning that we were personally involved in that has helped the rest of the country protect that national infrastructure and make them more resilient as to how they can reroute networks and make sure that I won't go into detail, but there's a couple of locations which were missed off in relation to the availability, and they took a bit longer to get back on again from 2015. That wouldn't happen now because of the way they've had to look at it.
From a region perspective. Yeah.
I would really just echo, especially what James said, that risk is where everything, if we had all the resources in the world, then we'd be able to plan for absolutely everything, but we don't have all the resources in the world. So we have to take some guidance from that National Risk Register. So at that government level, what are they seeing as the main risks? And then also we have to feed that in locally and say, actually, at a national level in York, one of the risks on the National Register would be around coastal flooding. Well, in York, it's not applicable. But we have other risks that are definitely applicable from the national level. So we do that assessment at the local level as well to make sure that we're really focusing our resources on the risks that are key to York. So yeah, that's all I would add.
Thank you. So on my list now, I've got Councillor Fenton, then Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Merritt.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to community preparedness, I know there is I think a really helpful household emergency plan checklist, which I think was created and promoted a few years ago, but I think is still relevant. So I suppose a request, if you could sort of share that as widely as possible, its existence. Obviously, it would be very expensive to print off hundreds of thousands of copies and mail them all to households, but there may be other channels through which councillors and others can circulate paper copies of that template locally, which I think would be would be helpful. And just say there's also a link to a "Are You Prepared" booklet. I don't know whether that's an older publication, but just say the link's broken. So if it's been superseded, you might want to take it off.
You're right, Councillor. Yeah, believe it or not, I just got an email today about the fact that the Are You Prepared booklet is things are still valid in there, but it's been updated now. The way people engage is different, and you're right in the fact that you can't print out that document and send it through to everybody. But what we do is encourage people to download it. It's a Word document. We've updated it now so that the old style that is on there has been updated on the LRF website. You can quite easily fill that in without printing, without saving it. You can put it on there. You can save it on your home screen. You can save it on your, so that if you do lose your power, you can still get things. There's other ways rather than just printing. I appreciate it's a good one. People can print it out at home as well if they need to. But we've got a couple of plans, which is the household plan for people to do it, and we also have a community plan as well, so that if something happens, the community plan is a bit more formal, then they know who to go to in their community.
My question was mainly about that household plan, but if
the Are You Prepared will be taken off because it'll be linked to this one on the LRF.
It'd be worth sharing the link either to the version by the York Council website or the Local Resilience Forum website, so that members are aware or reminded of it and know to promote it locally. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, the website comes up for a regular review, and like I say, I got notification today, so it will be done in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. It's 5 areas, but they're all quite short, if that's okay. So number one, just on Councillor Fenton's point, if we want to put something out to all households, I would think it actually would be quite easy in terms of getting sponsorship from relevant partners. For example, Yorkshire Water do a lot of emergency planning and that sort of thing, power companies, everything like that. So if we as a council decided we want 100 and whatever it is, 75,000 things go through doors, I don't think that would be that hard to do with sponsorship potentially. Second thing, I'd like you to make my life harder, because when I'm a naughty boy and forget to bring my council pass here to council's West Office, as I have done today, they don't ask any questions at all, and this is something that needs to be sorted out. Okay, I just tell them I'm a councillor, I give them a name which could be made up, and they give me a badge, and I've got free reign throughout the entire building. And I have raised it before with, the professional security people we have downstairs, and nothing's been done about it. And it's just absolutely ridiculous that I don't have to give any sort of name of a councillor. There are no checks done whatsoever on it. And where we read about risks of terrorism and things like that and report, and it's not them recognising me at all or anything like that. It's not them recognising me at all. It just seems absolutely ridiculous. The sort of checks that other organisations were doing at West Office, you just say I've forgotten my pass as a councillor or a non-councillor and come straight in. Third point, I don't know what's so entertaining over there, by the way. Is it? Do you want to share at all? Or? No, okay. The third point I make is just on the vulnerable people. I'm very conscious that a lot of people who are vulnerable would not accept that. That's the last thing they'd ever accept. Is it easy for people to feed in somebody they think is vulnerable? In other words, basically a neighbour report somebody that they're concerned about, is my sort of first question, and I'm hoping and assuming it is. And by that I mean, can somebody just sort of Google concerned about resident, who may be struggling to walk or anything like that, and then they can report them rather than being some vast process? That's my first sort of question. Hopefully that's a yes. You guys are on top of that. The second sort of question I've got is about the business contingency. So the business I work for, we've got the whole contingency, absolutely fine. We're reasonable sized national firm, to the point that one of the guys in my office is basically works from Spain and was absolutely unaffected by everything that happened yesterday, and doing a normal office job. So something there. So hopefully the vast majority of what we're doing business continuity wise is targeted at smaller businesses, for whom it will be under the radar. I'm guessing Aviva have got it sorted. I'm guessing universities have got it all sorted and everything like that. So hopefully that's the case. And the final question, which I guess is the most sort of notable one, is the fact that, having read the report, I'm not really clear on where I go from here and what tangibly I do. I have had a look at the Local Resilience Forum thing just on the website just now, and that looks quite good. But for example, I'm on Copmanthorpe Parish Council, and a month ago, somebody raised the subject of should we have an emergency plan? And obviously they were quickly sort of told, oh, well, we looked at that about 15 years ago. And that the mindset of people, rightly or wrongly, is that if you do something, then it goes up a level, the council will then take over, goes up another level, the blue light service will take over, and goes up another level, you know, the military will take over. So what would be your sort of message if you were sat there at Copmanthorpe Parish Council saying, you know, whether people should do that now? You know, would you sort of say, yeah, go on the website, get a community plan, it's a really important thing to do? Would you sort of say, watch this space? What would be, you know, the sort of, you know, would you urge like a parish council to do it? And if so, how? Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, first of all, sponsorship of leaflets. Yeah, great idea. It'd be good if we could put it across everyone. Maximise every opportunity we can. Fair enough. We did have discussions about when the council tax requests go out. We could stick a leaflet in there to try and promote the Yorkshire Ready Together. We weren't quite ready for it for this year, but it's something that we could look at for future. And obviously, it'll be across the whole of North Yorkshire, just to get more and more people engaging with it. Or do we put a fridge magnet or something in there so it's always available for people to put it on the fridge and being able to scan that QR code? We're looking at other ways of doing it, but obviously cost is always an issue. But we'll bear that in mind, Council. Thank you. Security, I'll mention it to them. So if you get bored, then there we go. We'll know what the problem is. So
I get asked for ID when I forget my badge, but yeah, that's a fair point, though, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah. Vulnerability, like I said, we're working on vulnerability to try and engage at a lower level to try and find out exactly what people do need or don't need. I also mentioned earlier when we were talking about the fact that you can self-identify or do the same for relatives. So if somebody is vulnerable, you can say with Yorkshire Water or with Northern Power Grid, this person is vulnerable and will need, and so the person doesn't need to do it. You could do that for them to say they're vulnerable. You also mentioned about knocking on doors, and Councillor Burton earlier also mentioned the same thing about 2015 floods. And over the last 5 years, whilst I've been here, we've had, I think, 3 or 4 floods where we've actually used leaflet drop. So we actually go knock on people's door and drop a leaflet through to say, you're at risk, are you okay, are you vulnerable? And we go down and do an actual physical check on people. So again, that's something that we have done previously. And then your last point, sorry, business continuity. We're trying to promote business continuity a bit further. Basically, they were talking about taking that off the level of resilience that we provide and what local authorities should or shouldn't do. It's currently still in there as a standard and looks like it's going to stay there, and it's something that we should promote. The previous argument was, should we be telling people like Marks and Spencers or other big companies what they should do with business continuity? We're not the experts with them. We can provide some level of advice. So at what level do we engage with people? But I think it's right what you say with the smaller businesses who perhaps don't engage as much and don't have as much resource and backing. How can they plan for those small outages? Which is why I mentioned the hairdresser with the bottles of water, keeping the business going. Sometimes it's about thinking for yourself. Other times people need a bit of a prompt to say, if you fill this in, if you do it, you've got a plan, you'll have more of an idea when something goes wrong. And we're agreed that, yes, we can promote that further. We can try and engage with businesses. We do a lot of work already. And later this month, we've got a meeting out at Monks Cross to make sure that we can engage more with businesses at Monks Cross, and also what happens with the community stadium. And it's about building that level of resilience across, not just people are trying to do business development and make money and promote things, but also how do we survive when there's an issue? How can businesses also help us as the emergency planning teams when there is an issue? How can they step forward and say, yes, we'll supply it? And we do have some major supermarkets who say, if you knock on our door, ask for what you want, we'll give it you, and we'll sort of bill out later. Don't worry about it, we'll open up any time. So again, it's that level of involvement, and not just communities, but also coming from national companies who will provide something. And it's that whole society engagement that we're trying to get to. We will try and get as far as we can, and we'll keep promoting it.
Thank you. One minute comeback, and I think Councillor Douglas maybe wants to say something. Sorry, so apologies for jumping out of you. Is presumably could commercialise some aspects of the helping businesses. You know, that can be given thought, can't it? And I'll suggest that particular, point. As I say, I wouldn't go for the national businesses in the sort of, way, because obviously they'll be covered by their national policies, except you're absolutely right that we can, hopefully have supermarkets and provide stuff to us. But for me, there'll be lots of small businesses out there that if we said to them, are you prepared for this, that, and that bad scenario? They say no. We say, do you want our, help with it? Because there'll be a great commercial opportunity there in addition to our statutory duties. So.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. There is information on the website, which is there for everyone, including businesses. But you're right, commercially, there could be something there as well. Thank you.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. And I think that Councillor Stewart raises some good points there, and particularly around what do we as councillors do to help our communities to move forward on this. And there is a part of the councillor training already that is about emergency response and awareness, isn't it? And I'm just wondering if there needs some thought about, therefore, what do councillors do in those kind of practical steps that they can take in their community, not just the awareness of how the system works, but making their communities more resilient as well. So perhaps we should take that back through joint standards, because they will look at the councillor training and whether that particular element can be kind of beefed up, I suppose, really. And then the other thing that I was going to say is that I think we likely should make sure that some information around this is going out in our resident emails. It does not hit everybody, but it's a regular communication that's going out to thousands of mailboxes across the city, businesses as well, because the information doesn't necessarily need to change particularly, does it? It could be a standard inclusion in our communications. Obviously, other methods need to be thought about, but that's quite an easy thing that could be done quite quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Yeah, completely agree. Next on my list, I've got Councillor Merritt, and then I'll try and draw this to a close. We've spent a good bit of time on it, and rightly so. Councillor Merritt, thanks for your patience.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just go back a little step to our statutory duties? The second bullet point is put in place emergency plans, and you've mentioned a number, and you can see those with links on the website. But what exactly is our statutory responsibility? Does it actually specify specific plans, or is it just a responsibility to choose to do those that we feel are important? And how do you go about making that decision as to how many emergency plans you have? Also, how often do you review them?
Yeah, first of all, there's national plans, which we do have to have a response to, and there's a national risk register. Not everything applies in the risk register to what we have in York, so there'll be some plans that we don't need. Some of the plans we have at a high level, which are across the Local Resilience Forum. So we do have a multi-agency flooding plan. We don't have a marine pollution plan for us. That's done across the coast. So there's issues that we could pinch that plan if need be, but we do have a local flood plan because our flood level is fluvial, and so we respond to that differently. And we could also likely to have surface water flooding, and again that is something that we would look at. So as well as having the plans which come out and there's in relation to national risks or regional risks, and we do look at them whether it's from national and what they think is likely, and then what's regional and likely, and then we look at them what's local across the LRF area, and then what have we got in York itself. An example of that is a learning that's come out of Grenfell with high-rise buildings. And so what's the level of risk? Well, the level of risk doesn't really apply to us. We haven't got that many high buildings. We have some which fall into a classification. And out of the whole of North Yorkshire, I think there's about 13 across the whole of North Yorkshire. 5 of those are in York. So we're looking at the detail on those that we have for York. Do we need a particular plan for one building, or would we engage with them further in relation to business continuity? If there's an incident, what do we do? And part of that is obviously taken on board with partners, because the fire are the expert in that as to what advice do they give them on the first call. And we engage at that at the integrated emergency management meeting that we have, which is local responders looking at local risk. So we also have one a water risk group, which will look at the risk on the River Ouse. So we apply things nationally, and we apply things regionally, and we apply things locally as we need. And some of those might be purely ours, whether it's the river boats or something locally that we have to look at as being a bit of a higher priority than others have inland. So it is something we do look at, and if other new risks come about, we raise them back up through the LRF risk register, look at those and see if we need to put them on the community risk register.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt?
Yeah, second question.
Can I ask how many you have, just out of interest?
2.
Yeah. Cool. Just for clarity, that's all.
Sorry, three, Chair. Apologies. How responsive is the system to changing risk positions? You know, very conscious of some of international affairs. We keep hearing certain people on the other side of the Atlantic talking about risks of third world wars, but more particularly for us, the European security positions clearly substantially changed because of in effect, the removal of the American guarantees. And that, of course, makes risks of European conflict much higher, with ramifications for us. And having seen what's happened on tariffs, you're also very conscious of the interrelationships and supply lines and all those types of things. This country is very dependent for food on its imports. We had real problems in the Second World War when we almost came unstuck on that front. And we now have a sort of next day delivery system. What emergency plans are in place to cover risks on food supply?
So I think there are 2 ways to think about risk. One is cause and one is the effect. So if we tried to plan for all the causes that might happen, it becomes a never-ending game. But the impact and the effect can often be generalised, whether it's a power cut or food security. And food security is on the, certainly it's on the local register. I think it's on the national one as well from memory. So yes, there is, and actually North Yorkshire is in a relatively stable position as regards to food security because of what surrounds us and what the predominant industry is outside York. So from a food security point, as an LRF, we're actually in a relatively good place. But so I think trying to think about what the likely effects are is where a lot of attention is paid, rather than what might cause those effects. I don't know if that's making sense. Sounds confusing to me, but I think I know what I mean. But those risks are kept under review. So there's a risk group that meets on a regular basis that reviews those risks at a LRF level. And there's also that happening at a national level. I don't know if you want to add anything, Steve.
Yeah, the only other thing on that, we do look at these, we get a forward look from the Cabinet Office to say these are the particular risks, and it's usually on a 6-month basis. Some of these include international concerns. If there's something on that forward look that we get, we look at it across the local resilience forum, say how is this going to affect us in North Yorkshire and New York. Again, if it's a particular issue, we'll raise it on that risk level. I will then bring it back and I will report it into our corporate management team, and I'll say these are the risks that we're looking at from Cabinet Office on the forward look, and these are the ones that I think are likely to affect us in York and might change our position. And whether that's the risk of cyber or like you say, or food or anything, the supply chain, some of those things might affect us, and so we raise it through the corporate management team and have a decision on there as to whether we need to do anything different. So it is something that's looked at across the whole of the network, including into the LRF and then for our senior teams as well to look at.
Thank you. And a quick third one. You talked about community resilience plans. Where would we be? Where would we find the information in terms of those that exist in our individual patches?
We do keep a list ourselves, so if we needed that, and George is actually doing some work at the moment in relation to rest centres and communities, trying to get people to refresh the plans. The information's on the website, and you can download that link, and then usually we engage with them, or they'll send a copy of their plan into us in emergency planning, and we can store it. The difficulty is when people move and move out of, so how relevant are they? So we'll do regular checks, going back on them and say, are you still the person to contact? Are you still the right one? That's the difficulty when it's across communities. But it is something that if you needed to know, you'd ask us a question if people have got that plan.
Could you send a link?
Yes, of course.
Because I haven't spotted it on the website.
Thank you. Right, colleagues. I think that's been a really interesting discussion. I think there's definitely room for at least a couple of recommendations. I would like to suggest, following the conversations had, that there's a recommendation to the executive regarding communications. So Councillor Douglas has already referred to trying to get a standing message in the resident facing emails that go out, which I'm guessing is very easy to do, really. But I think, building off what Councillor Stewart said, there's surely scope for some sort of sponsored communication to all, or if it's not sponsored, worked into a pre-existing communication like the council tax notification, just so we cover all bases, really. It'd be good to task the executive to look into that. Totally accept that there's an element of responsibility on individuals and communities, but that won't cover everyone, will it? So if the council can try and cover everyone in a timely enough fashion, I think that would be welcome. Because as admirable as the work is that's going on, and frankly, I dread to think what pressure you must be under sometimes with this sort of thing, and on all the other people working in this ecosystem. I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of the general public are just not even conscious of this. And I say that with respect to the citizens of York, but I think we could all do with a helpful nudge on this front. So the recommendation would be to executive, or for executive, to look at an all household communication, be it sponsored by partner agencies or even businesses, or included in the pre-existing communication, to let residents know about where to go to become informed about what they can do to become more prepared, something along those lines. Thank you. I do like Councillor Stewart's suggestion on whether there's any scope to commercialise giving preparedness advice to small businesses. I think that's worth a look by the executive. It might not have legs, it might. There's no harm in looking, is there? Councillor Stewart?
And just on that, we could maybe task Make It York with looking at aspects of it as well. Could be a way for them to be seen amongst small businesses. So they could add the sort of commercial, element in terms of how they reach out. And then obviously CYC directly add the, the tangibles of what the resiliences we're trying to get out about.
Yeah.
Or help with.
Councillor Fenton?
I suppose you just be careful we don't reinvent the wheel, because Federation of Small Businesses and others may already have such materials, in which case we can piggyback potentially. Because I'm guessing it's something that the FSB will do in terms of business continuity, but there's no reason why we can't spread the word.
Well, indeed, and I'm sure that if the recommendation was taken on by the executive, they would find out whether the FSB do indeed cover that base. But it's a good point, isn't it? I mean, a lot of small businesses don't have that capacity to do that extra work outside of the day-to-day. Other points, I think these are fairly routine but still important. It's not really, recommendation to the executive or to anyone to recirculate a nudge on the training to councillors around this. I think that would be helpful. And again, following Councillor Stewart's comment, a conversation with security about checking councillors turning up without passes properly on the main desk. I think that's probably enough for us as a council. There's obviously bigger questions, but this involves many other agencies and organisations from a much higher station than ours. I'm sensing no objections from colleagues. So I would just like to thank Councillor Douglas, Steve, James and Georgia for your time and your contributions. It's been genuinely interesting, a lot of food for thought. Thank you. Colleagues, it'll be good to have a strictly 10-minute comfort break. I was going to say 5, but I always say 5 and we never end up making it 5, so I'm saying 10. So don't make it 15. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so welcome back to this evening's scrutiny committee. We're now on to the next main item of business, which is a review of the bags to bins project. This has been on the work plan for some time now, and then we rejigged the dates so we could get a more timely update, I think. Going back now through my mind and through my emails. But we have Councillor Jenny Kemp with us, Executive Member, Ian Holt, James Gilchrist and Rebecca Copley. Thank you for waiting for this item to come. I know the previous item went on for some time. If you want to give a brief overview of the paper, I'm not sure who wants to lead on it, and we'll get into questions, comments, recommendations. I'm not sure who wants to go.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'll give a summary, an update of where we are today with the bags to bin projects that's been mooted and going on for a number of years. In January 2024, the decision was approved by executive to recommence the project. There was lots of work done throughout 2024, reassessing streets, looking at eligibility and who would be able to take a container against some criteria and move on to a wheeled collection as opposed to a bag collection. In late 24, we rolled out the project to 2 streets in Hull Road ward. We did lots of work with other stakeholders and partners, NEOs, Public Realm, etc., and monitored the progress of that. We responded to any fly tipping reports, etc., issued enforcement letters, and did monitoring at certain stages throughout the wheeled, as the transition to wheeled collections. There's been some more reassessment and work done in early 2025 among the other wards and streets that we feel could transition onto a wheel collection. Since then, we've done some, or the team have done some virtual ward walkabouts with councillors that have been well received and ironed out some issues that have been highlighted, and we've worked, that's been received really positively, and we've had positive outcomes on a number of issues that may have arisen. We've run through procurement. We have a capital budget for the container purchases. We're going through the procurement for that in early 2025. There's been other competing pressures, both in the waste service and across support services in the council that help with the procurement, which has caused a slight delay in terms of that procurement of the containers. But that's now, we've overcome that. And we just this week have issued out an update to councillors around when the letter drop will be. So some of them letters will be going out this week as part of phase 1, which is Micklegate and Eworth wards. Will then be a second letter that will include FAQs around the week, Monday, 9th of June, or that week commencing that. That's approximately 2,835 properties. And then later on, around 5 or 6 weeks after that, we'll have, phase 2, Fishergate, Clifton, Guildhall, Holgate will receive a letter, again, their first letter around 9th of June, saying what the project is, etc. And they will be getting a bin as part of the project and the rollout. Again, they'll get a second letter with FAQs, which go out week commencing Monday, 21st of July. This is approximately just short of 2,800 properties again. So in total, around just short of 5,500 properties. Obviously, touching on some of the benefits is, they get to contain waste within a container now, once they receive their bin, and it will also help our crews and operationally in terms of health and safety and those benefits there for them to be able to collect the wheeled containers opposed to a bagged collection. We do have an updated fleet as well that can cope better with that in terms of accessing and getting into those areas and collecting those wheeled bins. So there'll be lots of communication with residents. Obviously, we'll support residents with the change, answer queries. The FAQs are there to obviously assist, but no doubt we will get individual queries, and there'll be things that we'll have to work on with in local areas.
Thank you for that. I'll kick off with a couple of questions before I invite colleagues in, unless anyone else wanted to add anything. Sorry, I just jumped in. Fair play. Thank you. So in the communications that are going out to the areas that will be getting the next set of changes, would I be right to assume that we'll be flagging up the assisted collection service in those comms? Because I would imagine in areas where you might have like very long terrace streets, then moving on to bins, the idea of wheeling it from like the middle of the back of a terrace street down to a collection point might then become too difficult for those who are on the edge currently of needing a hand with getting the bins out. Is that already covered, or can it be if not?
Yes, it is covered in more detail in the second letter. The first letter is the initial, this is coming.
Yeah.
And gives everybody the opportunity to contact us. So they can either do that through the contact centre. We have a direct email address to the team directly. Or you can start scanning the web page to get more information than is contained in the letter before you contact us. But this is the point really where people do start to contact us and say, I might have a problem with this, or I might struggle.
Yeah.
And this is the point where we start working with people. The first letter is a simple letter that tells you it's coming. The second letter, in about 6 weeks' time, is much more detailed. So if they haven't read the first one, or they're like, oh, right, okay, I'll think about it later. By the time they get the second one, there's much more detail in there. But again, they can contact the team directly by emailing us, or they can come to us via the contact centre.
Great.
If telephone is better for people.
Yeah, okay. And do we refer to it as the assisted collection service in the letters that are planned, or is it a sort of, if you have any?
Yeah, so what we refer to it is most people who have assistance already know that they get assistance.
Yeah.
But then in the second letter, it's just said if you struggle, and the way that we've worded it is that, and the way that we do word information around assistance now is that if you don't have a friend, a neighbour, anybody else in the household that can help you, let us know and we'll try to help you. So before we just used to say there's nobody in your household that can do it, let us know. And now we try to foster that kind of neighbourhood thing of can you help somebody around you type of thing. But ultimately, if somebody doesn't have assistance now, but they feel that they could manage with a bin bag, but they might struggle with a wheeled bin, then we can offer that assistance service to them if they express that they might struggle with a container versus a bag.
Yeah, cool, thank you. And my second question was, I obviously note the sort of benefits of having proper bins, especially in terms of health and safety and sort of round efficiency. I'm wondering if, and the health and safety thing's probably much harder to measure, but do we have any sort of early indications of reduced number of days where staff are injured as a result of working rounds where there's bins instead of bags, that sort of thing? I mean, I'm not questioning the principle of that benefit. I'm sure it is the case. I'm just curious.
I'll need to go back to the January 24 report where this was approved. I think when we were writing that report, we certainly looked at it. I think there was some research, might be wrong, done by Edinburgh University that showed there was a safety aspect and reduced sickness from bin collections rather than lumping bags around. But that is me speaking from memory. I'll try and dig it out while we're talking, see if I can find that.
Okay, thank you. All right, colleagues, Councillor Jane Burton.
I mean, I declare an interest in that. I'm in Micklegate Ward and we're part of the first rollout. But I've appreciated as a ward councillor the very good communications that we've had with you that has allowed us to answer the questions of residents in the ward about this. I just wondered, I mean, I personally do get an assisted collection now because my neighbour is now an Airbnb, and prior to that, for years, my neighbours have very kindly assisted with my bin and recycling. And the downside of having short-term accommodation right next door is you never know who's going to be there. And they're certainly not going to take my bins out for me. So thank you too, because it is working, because I haven't needed it for years. And it's working really well. And I just wondered how many people have contacted you, do you know, about? Okay.
Went out yesterday to the initial phase 1 people, so that's about 2,000 people, and they've got about 6 weeks now before they get their second letter that tells them when the bin is coming. Most people will start to contact us now if they think they will really struggle with it, and then we've got some time to start firefighting and find out if anybody really does have a real problem that might have to change things, or whether we can just do something to help them individually.
Yes, I mean, and it is something that people have raised with me. And another thing that people have raised with me is that they don't feel they've got enough rubbish to put in the bin. So I've been telling them, well, share the bin with your neighbour if you both, you know, if you've got 2 single households, not much rubbish, there's nothing to stop them just using one bin, is there?
Yeah, but bin size is a funny thing, really. You'll get people who say that they'll never fill it, but then once you give them a set capacity, they will find stuff to put in it and they will fill it. And then you'll have other people who will feel completely confined by it and say that I can't possibly manage with 180 litres. It's all sort of perspective, but we do offer larger bins to people who would struggle with it 180, and they do qualify for it because they've got a larger household.
Yeah, no, I've had the issue that people have been worried by the fact that they don't put out a lot of rubbish because they do recycle and compost things. So
well, also if you live in Micklegate, if you are in the city centre rather than the outer Micklegate, you might benefit from a weekly recycling collection as well. And that often helps people sort of slim their bin to coin the phrase, you know, because they weekly can get rid of extra material, and St Nick's take extra material that we can't take as a large domestic service.
But that's my experience of, you know, as a ward councillor, of people feeding back to me. It is quite unusual question sometimes, but yeah. And I also just tell them about the health and safety benefits for the operatives, because I do know how many people were injured, quite badly injured at times. Because I say to them, well, you know, if you've got glass or tins in there, and they say, oh, well, we always wrap ours up. And I said, so do I, but not everybody does. And the last thing you want is for somebody to cut themselves. And also, if the bags are not collected, which can happen, and people ring you up and say, you know, it looks like Armageddon at the end of our street at the moment because the bin was missed.
But one of the
bag was missed.
Bags, if they don't appropriately wrap up the waste, or they haven't put it in a purpose-made refuse bin. A lot of people can often put out kitchen bin liners, which are the white ones you'd often see in the yellow, and they're not made for presentation of waste, and they often do split open, and if they're left in alleyways. We do ask people not to use those, but things like glass and sharp objects are much more likely to come through those types of bags rather than, but that's obviously a cost then again, because people feel like they bought a kitchen liner and then they've got to go and put it in a refuse bin on top of that, and again it's extra effort, and so people don't often want to do that, but we do ask people not to use kitchen liners for that purpose.
Thank you.
No worries, Councillor Benburton.
Yeah, thank you. Not an awful lot to say. I mean, on the whole, it's like it's going very well. And all the communication, like you've said, has been really positive, and even some cost savings thrown in there. So it's good to see. I think the only one I was going to raise, I can't remember if it got raised last time, and it was just a bit of a follow-on for as it gets rolled out more, is the issue with the back of these alleyways and the bin collections ends up being kind of bin slalom at the end, trying to cycle down the back of those alleyways. People, I guess it's kind of people learning the etiquette of where to put their bins and where they get left at the end of the collections. The only complaints I've had from residents where we've had it rolled out is that issue of how they get back down the alleyway at the end of the day, especially on bikes where they've been blocked off by them being left out. Do we give advice to people and routes about what they should be doing with them? Because often people don't take them back in the back of their gates and then it just turns into.
Yeah, so part of the
bit of chaos.
project is that we are going to do officer site visits. I think it's within 3 weeks, 3 months, and then maybe it's 6 months. We're going to narrow it down. We've also engaged with key stakeholders like the public realm street cleansing teams and the neighbourhood enforcement teams, so that if there are bins that are constantly left out in the alley, blocking the access, we talk to those people if we can identify them. In areas where people have abandoned bins and they never take them in, we've tagged them to say this bin is going to be removed if you don't remove it, and we'll take it away. And we have done that in certain areas, but we do advise people how to present their bins and how it should be done properly in CCPs, at CCPs, not outside of them. And we also have ongoing work with the crews to make sure that even if they've collected them from outside of the CCPs, where perhaps a resident's just wanged it at the end of the street and it's half blocking the pavement, that they might have collected it from there, but let's make sure we're putting it back lined up against the wall of that central collection point, so it's not causing a nuisance to people if we can help it.
Thanks.
I've got Councillor Fenton, then Councillor Joe Coles.
Did you want to come in, James?
No, thanks.
All right. Thank you for the report. I was just thinking about possible knock-on benefits for other areas that are currently on on black bins in terms of the thinner wagons. Obviously, parked up streets are a problem for a whole range of different reasons, not least of which when the bin wagon can't get down. So it is the new type of fleet likely to help with that issue. Through the work you've been doing in the walkarounds, you've been doing assessing suitability. Are there sort of knock-on benefits potentially in terms of identifying areas where a different approach is needed to controlling parking and the way in which people do park, in order to facilitate the bin wagons being able to get down the street? And finally, I don't have many terrace streets in my ward, but I have a few. And there's been some confusion recently where people received a letter reminding them to to present their bins at a central collection point, even though they hadn't been doing that for some time. Maybe they should have been, but nobody was, and it hadn't been pointed out to them.
Which street was that?
So
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's where those kind of issues rise. If you let ward councillors know if there's going to be a street-wide comms, then we can try and help manage that in terms of.
Yeah, I'm aware of that particular issue, and it happened while I've been on leave for the last 2 weeks, and my team didn't perhaps follow the course of action that I would have guided them to take. So yes, that is the advice that they have been given in the future, that any large scale change or perceived change in presentation, we would inform ward councillors before we do that.
And just to add, councillor, yeah, I think that were a bit of a lesson learned. It were in terms of the comms out to Northfield Terrace Railway View for us all. Again, I were on leave as well, and I do agree with another councillor in your ward that we could have approached it slightly differently in a bit more of a subtle way. So we've definitely learned from that as a service, and yeah, we're asking for a behaviour change there where technically it should have been a CCP, a central collection point. There's been a behaviour change somewhere years ago where we've started collecting from rear of properties or front of properties or whatever it might have been. And that's for us to work in-house with the service and then with residents appropriately. In terms of the vehicles, yes, they are more slender and smaller than some of the vehicles we used to operate, but they are still quite sizable. So still don't fit down some of these back alleys. They do help with, in terms of turning, certainly in terms of the turning circles and getting in and out of the streets. So it does help with that, but yeah, they still don't fit down some of those, some of them back alleys, and parking does remain park cars is a challenge for us to navigate as a service. It does cause issues, I would say weekly at least in terms of some areas.
Can I ask on that very, sorry, James?
I was just going to say there is a bit of join up. So if we get regular problems in a certain location, they will get fed through to transport and they go into the annual review for double yellow lines. So we've done a few of those in the last round where we've identified, or the drivers have identified locations going, look, you know, it happens in some places once a year. Fair enough, that happens. But if it's a regular hotspot, the drivers will feed it in and then that can feed through to transport and it gets reviewed for the double yellow lines and parking controls to make sure we can access.
You read my mind,
Oh, sorry.
James. Councillor Joe Coles?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, not really very much to add, but just to commend the report for the sensitive handling of what could be a very politically charged issue. So thank you for that. Just a question about the new areas that will be getting the correspondence around the wheel bins. Is there an option for people if properties have got bag collections currently, but some of those properties might have provided their own wheelie bin for their own purpose, do they have to then replace it with a council bin? Can they actually just use their own bin until it breaks and then have their council bin? Or what's the scenario? Because presumably some of these areas, households will have taken matters into their own hands in the intermediary period.
So you mean that people who have bought their own bins who are under the scope of this project? No, I mean, what I would say is we shouldn't be collecting them now anyway. That doesn't mean that we're not. There are lots of savvy residents out there who can often, the problem with bags and bins is that the areas often butt up together. And so you can have bag areas and bin areas next to each other. And some people are obviously sometimes savvy and realise, well, if I put my bin over there and I get a bin, I can get that collected. And by introducing the wheel bins across the board, that kind of equals the playing field and stops that happening. No, we don't want people to use their own. We want them to use our CYC provided one. This first bin is free. Containers are currently chargeable. And if you lose that bin, if you have it stolen, technically they are liable for that charge then. So when we letter people, we are asking them to make sure that they label their bin the minute they get it to make sure it is attached to their household, so it doesn't go walkabout. But no, we don't intend to collect non-CYC bins.
And I think just to add to that, councillor, the bins that we provide are procured through our framework that marry up and are tested and will work on our bin lifts for the vehicles. Last thing we want is, you know, a slightly different design or whatever that doesn't match our bin lift and causes an health and safety issue to our crews.
Thank you. I've got a supplementary on that from Councillor Healy.
Thank you very much, Chair. If you're currently on bags and you're staying on bags, can you speak to the council and say, I'd actually like a bin?
You can absolutely do that. We have reassessed and reassessed and reassessed everything that we had in scope, and we have now a third phase, which is a list of streets which are very difficult, and we are happy to go back and talk about and reassess and see what we can do with them. For example, Bishopthorpe Road is very long, it's very complicated, and you can't say Bishopthorpe Road can have bins and you can't say they can't have bins because the nature of it is so long and complicated. If somebody comes to us and says, you've said I can't have a bin, but I've got a side access gate that goes onto a street that does have a bin, then we'll have a look at that for you. But there are certainly areas that are absolutely very, very unlikely to get a bin in the future. But if you can tell us that you think that you can do that and you've got access and it's safe, there's no steps, there's no, you know, then we'll absolutely look at that for them.
Supplementary, Councillor Stewart? Go on.
I'm just wondering, I mean, you know, do you happen to have any, I mean, I'm guessing you do have pictures of your internal workings of, you know, streets that are covered, streets that you'd like to be covered. If you do have them, and I'm getting blank looks. Well, just for us as councillors, from an interest point of view, to see what the picture looks like across the city.
Like a map.
Yeah, well, a map, a technical word there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I know obviously areas that are not covered at all, you know, but in terms of other streets, yeah, a
I
map.
mean,
is what
we
I'm
can
looking for.
do, but what you're generally looking at is the city centre.
Yeah, I realise that, but obviously then it's the carve up of, you know, so you'll have some streets where you say these are still absolutely bags. These we'd like to, if there are things like that can easily be shared, I'd be interested in it. I don't know if others would, but if there aren't, you know, but.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Okay, next on my list, I've got Councillor Merritt.
Yep. Really pleased to see this and see the rollout. A lot of our residents who aren't on black bags would certainly like to see the bins introduced and some of the rat and cat problems with the existing black bags ended. So it's great to see the rollout. My one relatively small question is that because of the delays, you're now ending up in the main holiday period when the bins are meant to be distributed. Are you going to take that into account in terms of those people who might be away? And we don't end up with, you know, bins being delivered left when there's no one there.
No, unfortunately, we can't be that bespoke about delivery. What we do in the second letter is give the residents a week that their bin will be delivered. So that they are aware that their bin is coming on that during that week. We can't be more specific than that, unfortunately. It does then give them the opportunity to perhaps enlist a friend or neighbour that might be able to take it in for them if they know they're not going to be there. Somebody that might already feed the cat for them, or perhaps. But we will ask if somebody says to us that they won't be able to receipt the bin, we might be able to put it up the drive for them or in the forecourt, for example. And we will endeavour to deliver things to the boundary of somebody's property, not to just leave them on the street as we do it. It would be to people's doorstep or forecourts as sensibly as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Healy has a fresh question.
Oh, really quick one. After this exercise is completed, how many properties will still be left on bags compared to number on bins? Nearly 1,000.
Sorry, it is in the report. It's under 2,000.
Yeah, it's about 2,000.
It's about 1,900, something like that.
Yeah, it's about, yeah, it's just short of 2,000.
2,000. I haven't got the exact number in my mind, but it's about 2,000.
And
Yeah, and again, we're looking very generally within the city walls.
Sorry, Councillor Ken?
Oh, sorry, just to follow up, but that's out of what, a total of something like 95,000 households across the city?
Yeah.
So it's a very small proportion left on bins, on bags, sorry.
And may I ask, is phase 3 going to try and deal with all of those remaining or some or most of those remaining?
It will look at the very difficult ones that are remaining from the other areas. So, for example, if you go into the depths of Old Walk, the Work Dyke, these kind of areas, a lot of them do actually already have bins because they have communal arrangements.
Yeah.
It's where you get flats above shops that have a thing, they don't have a frontage, like Gillygate, for example. They don't have anywhere that they could put a bin and they, you know. So they are the very niche, small ones that would absolutely not be under the current way that we collect waste. We wouldn't be able to do it, but everything that is difficult out of the wards that we are doing is going into phase 3, and we're going to look at it again, even though we've reassessed it during this process. We're going to go back and do it again and see if there is a way around them. But we can't look at those things in super detail now because it would detract from moving the project forward.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, looking ahead, because phase 3 sounds really quite fiddly, I'm guessing it'd be difficult to say. It would be good to come back to this committee around this time to give an update on phase 3, because it sounds like it could take a long time. Or is that?
We can do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we can absolutely do that.
Okay. I mean, I would second or echo the comments made to say top work, you know, to the staff involved in getting this through. It's definitely progress. I fully welcome it, especially there's a really annoying meme doing the rounds on social media. And because it's in black and white, people think it's like really legit. It's like an old school bin man from like the 1930s swinging a metal bin around his back with a cigarette. And it's like, remember when bin men were proper bin men? And I'm like, God, that would be like the opposite of progress. So I feel like we're in a much better place. I do follow the wrong people. Yeah. I need another call, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Hook.
Yeah, this is nothing really to do with that, but linking in with the previous thing, people asking assistance aren't necessarily in health and social care. Would that be a way of running them together to assess who's vulnerable for when it's an emergency planning? Just thinking.
I think the way we gather that data pulls a number of data sets, and I think the people on assisted collections are part of the that data trawl we do to identify those vulnerable residents.
Thank you. Councillor Burton and Councillor Stewart.
I can just say that they just ask you the question, are you disabled or unable to, you know, do this? And you have to answer honestly. And that, they asked me that over the phone, and you reply. And it'd be a bit funny to pretend you couldn't put your bin out, I suppose, wouldn't it? Yeah, but no, they don't ask you what the problem is or anything like that. It's not as personal as that. It's just, you know, whether this is something that you need doing. And I had used this service previously, years and years ago, and I got a letter, I think, about a year ago, asking why I wasn't using the service and would I like to use the service again. So I can only promote the service and say how good it is and how excellent they are. And as a ward councillor, they've been excellent at keeping us up to date with what's going on and how it's all rolling out. We did look at maps. That was online. We had a session with two officers who went through, and I know one of my colleagues had quite a few inquiries from people in parts of Bishopsthorpe Road that are very difficult to serve, and they really have gone out the extra, you know, the extra mile to sort this out.
Yeah, Sever and Lauren, the two officers who are working on the project. On the assisted, the crews use the in-cab report system to log if somebody's not put their, if they're unassisted but the bin wasn't there, you know, if there was a problem, or if the bin is being presented and this person is registered as assisted, they log that on the in-cab, and then we write to people and say, do you still need the service? It used to be something that was dished out for years and that people would move in and out of houses and it would stay with them, and now it's very much person-centric, and it lasts for 3 years. We rewrite to you and say, do you still need this service, unless the crew alerts us to a problem. So we keep it fresh and updated, and we keep a not an eye on, but we know the list, and make sure that people who are using it should be using it. And, you know, are we missing something? Has somebody gone into hospital? They've stopped using it for a few weeks, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I know I was told, sorry, not to sue if I had a visitor around them, say, oh, put your bins out.
Yeah, don't do it.
And they say, oh, no, actually don't, because it confuses the system then, which is a kind of a shame in a way, but I understand it too. So just some of the intricacies of the assisted bin system that we're all learning tonight.
Indeed. Councillor Stewart?
Yeah, I'm just going to disagree with you, I'm afraid, Chair, saying I don't think they should actually come back before scrutiny again, because I think this all works perfectly well. I think we've looked at it once, we've had the report written, and obviously it says in here about the officers have been meeting and had briefings with the, you know, ward members and everything like that. And I think that's far better and far more sensible way than, obviously it takes officers time being here. And I just think when we're scrutinising and we're looking at things, I can think of a million things that we should be looking at where we have real questions to ask and real concerns about how things are done. So I don't think it makes sense to have these guys back. And that is a good thing for them, you know, as a compliment to them. So yeah, I don't see the value it would add having to get have another report, come here again, etc.
Well, I feel like I say this too often, Councillor Stewart, but I think you've won me over there. Yeah, fair point. Do colleagues have any recommendations other than to note the progress and thank officers for their work, and wish them well moving forward? Is that fair? Thank you all. Thanks again for your time. I know it's a late one. It always is when we have more than one item on the agenda, but that's a good thing because we get stuck in. So yeah, we'll wrap that up and we'll move on to the final item, which is a look at the work plan. Feels quite strange doing this as we are about to step into a brave new world of scrutiny. So there's one planned meeting for this committee, as is for May. That'll be a meaty meeting. We've got 3 good items on there. Beyond that, though, I've basically kept, I think, all of the sort of standing items that we've raised or wanted to look at, so that hopefully the new version of this committee can address them. It would be a shame if they disappeared, but that will be for the future chair and committee to sort of keep an eye on. Councillor Merritt, is that a hand?
We, as you remarked at the beginning of the meeting on the minutes, we didn't get the parking report that we've been expecting. Is there no chance it's, and we've not had it today, is it not going to be available at least by the final meeting of the committee?
I mean, if it was somehow doable, it would mean a 4-item meeting, or we drop an item. I mean, I'm looking at James now. Would it be possible to? Obviously, we discussed the parking issue at the last meeting. That report didn't come. Could we do it for May?
I need to have a conversation with the executive member about whether it's ready, because the motion was that we needed to work with the executive member on that item, and part of the reason we weren't really ready was because we hadn't done that conversation first. So whilst those conversations are ongoing, we haven't reached a conclusion on them. So I need to have a conversation with the executive member to check whether it's in their fit state by 20th of May. So whilst we might be ready from an officer perspective, I need to have that conversation. So I'll pick up that conversation and then refer back to you and Robert, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair. We had the first meeting of the working group, which is due to oversee the new scrutiny arrangements week before last, I think it was. One of the things we discussed was, once we have the main meetings out of the way, for each of the new committees going forward, and this committee will be sort of largely intact, to take a view as to whether, depending on what had already been scheduled in for June and July, whether there would need to be a June and a July meeting of this committee and the other new committees, or the preference was to have either a June or a July meeting. So I don't think we need to decide now, but I think at the May meeting, it'd be useful for there to be clarity on the prospect or possibility of a parking report in June or July, because that might dictate when that meeting happens, when the new iteration of this committee meets. So just to flag that there is some flexibility depending on what James comes back with. And just to say, it would be, if it is a June or July meeting, if we could have a sort of first anniversary of the Dial and Ride scrutiny recommendations, that would be nice. I'll bring a cake with a cake on it. It'd be nice to have that as well.
Well, you know, I share the view on the Dial and Ride item. It's something that we need to keep pressing on. Councillor Stewart. But thank you, Councillor Fenton, for the wider update as well.
I know we wouldn't normally sort of request the gender order, but can I request that at the May meeting we do section 106 first? Because I think that's by far the biggest item, the most tangible one, and where members are probably most interested in it, and we could potentially go on for hours and hours. So have that first, and then on the actual, well, other members, that is not me, I'd be succinct and to the point. But and then on the assets of community value, because obviously we have scoped reports wrongly in the past. For me, it's very much about the last point, preparing for law change on community right to buy. Now we can broaden out what assets are bought, because all of the other points are very light in terms of we'd all welcome ACVs like the local pub, and we'd all, say encourage with. Everybody knows about it already, so I think that's very light. So that would be my particular points on the agenda order on that, please. I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. Very helpful. Appreciate it. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, thank James for his reply on the parking. Clearly, in terms of the second public speaker, if we get that report, and that will be an opportunity to pick up the issues she raised in my ward.
Yes, potentially. That would be an opportunity.
Yes. And I echo Chris's comment about the section 106. We know that's a big issue that we really do need to get to the bottom of the problems in that area.
Yeah, very much take it on board. We can make that happen. We can make it first, no problem. That's real power, isn't it? Moving it up and down the agenda. But thank you, colleagues, for your time and contributions tonight. Always interesting, and very much appreciate the sort of collegiate atmosphere that we have. And I wish you all a good evening, because I have no urgent business. Cheers.